Hey there.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can indeed. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing great to the best of my knowledge as well.
Yeah, sometimes I have to just check with myself. How am I doing today?
Yeah.
Oh man, so are you on the East Coast, right? So it's afternoon for you?
Yeah. Where are you? I'm assuming you're in Rhode Island.
No, I'm actually in California.
Oh, excellent. Yep,
Yeah.
I'm in sunny Jamestown and the sun's going down.
Oh, sunny Jamestown. That's nice. I've been there. It's a pretty cool town.
It's fun time. Now, now,
What
how did you find us?
how did I find you? Oh, just like random LinkedIn searching, looking for innovators. Anybody
Yeah.
who's got innovation in their job title.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
Good.
especially interested in what's going on in the medical space because it's just so ripe for disruption. So it's cool to hear what what you guys have been working on. So
Yeah. And are you reasonably do you know kind of do you know what we've been working on or the various
no,
uh,
let me
okay.
know. I want to know. I want to hear. I want to hear about all the innovative stuff you're doing in the medical space.
Okay. Do you mean just shall I just start talking or I can
Go
talk?
ahead. Tell us what
um,
like, typically what I do is like tell us a little bit about your background and what you're working on and anything interesting and then we just sort of range into all sorts of topics. That's usually the way we do things.
okay. Well,
All right.
do you want to start? Shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, so my background is I did my master's degree in industrial design at Rhode Island School of Design, and then had a ranging career that I think I was just taking a walk and I figured I'm on company number 19.
Wow. That's a
Um,
number list of numbers.
yeah, no, it's quite a lot of different, but there's been a sort of central theme to that, which is really that the all of them have been somehow connected to the idea of making new products, systems, and services, and
Mhm.
so that took it started as in what started as an invention house, then became a design and engineering company that then led us to starting factories in China to make stuff. So sort of with the idea that having a good idea is fine, but you've then got to figure out who's going to buy it, who's going to make it, blah blah blah. Um, and then over space of probably 20 years or 15 years, found myself and the company more and more interested in the medical space. And I think um, there are a lot of reasons for that. I mean, some of them were driven by business, and that gave built a company up called Zymedica, which I'll say is the country's biggest and best outsource medical device commercialization company, offices around the country and in Hong Kong, um, and which I sold oh, 6 years ago, about 6 years ago, the bulk of the company, and looked to then find something to do in kind of quasi-retirement,
Mhm.
and set up a non-profit where what we do, it's the New England Medical Innovation Center, and we work to address a very specific need that I had seen time and time again in the medical space, that there were a lot of good concepts with clinical value around, but there weren't so many people who understood what the implications of a relationship with the FDA was,
Mhm.
um, and how that would then drive their business model, their funding needs, their scheduling, their hiring, and everything else. And I had witnessed terrible, unfortunate things go on with great concepts with incredible clinical value hitting the ground because for one reason or another. And so that's really where I'm focused today. En route, I think I got 140 odd patents and have done
Congratulations.
everything from robots to feminine hygiene products to the easy button. I mean, if you want to take, so we put yep, the most profitable thing we ever did. Hundreds of infant products, all sorts. So, really a very fun career. Largely around product for the first 15 years, largely around product, and then in the last 15 years, really about medical devices, and now just helping startups. So we work now with companies all over the world, and what was supposed to be a retirement job
is retire. Inventors never retire.
Yeah, no, we don't. I mean, and it's incredibly. We've got a great team in Providence, and work with companies and startups at this point all over the world: Korea, India, Scotland, out of Harvard, out of MIT, out of people's basements, you name it. We help line them up and then go through the process of getting them funded and sometimes telling them they're not very good ideas and all the things you have to do.
It's better to actually tell them right up front when it's not a good idea, because then they can go think of a new one, as opposed to just letting them string them along. So
right.
New England is a bit of a misnomer then. It should be like the global medical innovation center, right? Like, is it because you're just based there, or?
New England is known to be strong in devices. So there's a good funding community here, and there are a lot of big device companies sort of in between Yale, between around Boston, Cambridge, and so forth. There's a real sort of hotspot, and Rhode Island was just too limited. But so we're sort of, a bit of both. But my partner in this is a Korean lady, and I'm obviously originally from overseas as well. So we're kind of mainly feeding off the ecosystem that's here. So when we've got an entrepreneur who needs a regulatory advisor, we know who that is. We're a sort of hub and spoke model today.
So you have a really good infrastructure in that location then to be able to.
Tremendous. And when we started, I didn't know how good it was, but it really is extremely good in this little corridor here. You can find almost anybody.
Right, because if you think about it, I mean, nowadays with coronavirus and everything, everyone's going, well, location isn't that important anymore, but it absolutely is, right? I mean, especially if you're working in a device space where there's, you're actually working on physical objects, right?
No, exactly. I mean, I think we can sort of we can say it's not important for a while, but eventually, if you do things, you have to have a bench somewhere with a thing on top of it and a screwdriver and whatever, and a testing. It becomes physical pretty quickly, and So yeah, no, it's been a much better. There is much more here than I expected.
Excellent. So I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier about dealing with the FDA and policy. Is that your main focus? Is to take the startup and move them through the process so that they understand how to work with the FDA and all these other agencies? Or do you do the sort of the full-blown incubator?
No, and we're much more holistic than that. I mean, the FDA really is one component, but the uniqueness of the American health system is such that it doesn't have a normal payer model. That who's going to pay for something is oftentimes different from who's going to value it. And so if you, and you've got to work that out. So the FDA is important because you have to pick your track. And, if you're a class 1 device, you kind of know what track you're in. If you're class 3, you know what that's going to, and the implications are obviously significant. what I think is really interesting today is with the if you understand, if you're looking at sort of digital product and connected product and so forth, you can create these, an entrepreneur can create a multi-generational plan that essentially goes up the regulatory ladder. But no, it is, we deal with the FDA, we deal with reimbursement, we look at teams, we look at the business plan. And why I think it's fun is that in the medical device space, different from the commercial, the consumer world that I've lived in for a long, long time, it's very much about lining up all your ducks and checking and saying, okay, is this feasible? Is it clinically relevant? Does it have market value? Will somebody pay for it? And you look up all, what's the reimbursement strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point, it's a sort of front-end loaded investment rather than an IT investment, which is very much sort of how much share can I get quickly in this market. So there's a sort of discipline to device development that is unusual, and it presents itself in a way that I think is, if entrepreneurs know what they're doing, they can be very successful quite just by going through that discipline.
But it sounds like you have to do a lot of planning up front. So you have the entire thing mapped out. Where does that leave, serendipity or agile changes? I mean, how can you do that if you have it all mapped out up front?
I think the last thing you want to do is, I mean, if you, I don't know how much you know about the way it works. Agile changes are something you want to figure out at the fuzzy front end, but the worst thing you can do in the device trade, because in the device development, because of the process that is required by the FDA, the last thing you want to do is be making agile changes. It sort of doesn't work that way.
How do you get through the process? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's like I was thinking about a device being created, and then do you have, like, how do you experiment with it to see that it does what you need it to do? Do you just sort of, is it just sort of like a thought piece, or how does that work?
You experiment without involving human beings.
Okay.
And so you imagine there are two components. One is everything you do before you stick it into somebody. There is this point where you do all the experimentation and all the iterative thinking and all that stuff before you come to the point of saying, this is what I'm now going to execute. And again, it's sort of why it's an interesting business model. And for somebody who went to design school, was not kind of natural to me until I understood why. But at the point that you're going to say, okay, I'm now going to apply this therapy to this individual, you've now triggered many parts of the FDA, and they want you to do it safely, and they want it to confirm that it's going to work. And so this is where that sort of front end loading of working everything out in theory and on the bench and so forth, and then you tidy it all up and then you shoot.
So you do a simulation. You have to simulate how it's going to operate before you actually
simulate. You do, it's benchtop studies. You'll try, unfortunately, pigs and all the things that are going to be done outside of the human body is sort of part of the
animals are harmed in this process, unfortunately.
What's that?
Animals are harmed in this process.
They are, and that it's very unfortunate, but it's a truth, and so I'm not going to get around it. But almost everybody. I mean, I got an email from a guy today who's he's got an invention. He's going to show it to me, and then he just wants to know who's going to make it. Right. And I know how our conversation is going to go, and it will go from you're going to need about $5 million, and you're going to need 3 years, and you're not going to talk to a manufacturer for at least the first two. So, you know, it is, this is what our organization facilitates, is to say,
Right.
that's not going to work like that. But if it's a good idea and it's clinically useful and has market value, then be patient, do it right, do it once.
Yeah, that leads me to think about corporate innovation in general, because a lot of times you have this push from innovators within organizations that say, "Oh, we got to get this done. We got to get it out. We got to get this done. We got to get it out." And then the corporate is saying, "Well, you know, we have to make sure that thing's proven and it's got ROI and blah, blah, blah." So it's a very similar model where you have to make sure it's pretty proven before you actually get to trialing it. I mean, you can build models, and I'm assuming nobody can actually wear them or insert them or whatever needs to be done until they get through these levels of process, right? You can't have somebody testing an early version of it or anything like that.
Yeah, and they probably do, but at the end of the day, if somebody is going to stick something into
Right.
you, I think you'd probably want to know that it was safe and efficacious.
Right. But it's not like these early trials now where somebody can say, "Oh, you know what? I have this problem. This device is going to help me, but it's really early on in the process." Can people skip the line and say, "I really want to try this," or do they still have to go through the whole thing?
If they said that, we would walk as fast as we could. No, I mean the liability that they're taking on
Right.
is, I mean, it, as you probably know, that the factor that is measured here is risk. Is what is the risk of something happening, and the different classifications are really equating to a risk level.
Right.
So, you know, if it isn't changing, if it isn't changing a clinical decision, or it isn't a therapy as such, then that could be pretty low risk, and you can do more. And this is where the world of digital product and is becoming really, really interesting, because you can have a lot of benefits that are outside of regulations that you can still benefit the system by. But as the risk level goes up to something, you know, an untoward outcome, then everybody needs to be careful. But at the same time, the play, you know, this is the biggest industry in the world, is the American healthcare industry,
Yep.
whatever it is, 23% of GDP.
Yeah.
So entrepreneurs have to get used to the idea that this is a big game, and they're expected. It's big and it's regulated.
Right.
So it's worth doing, but that's again where we talk to and help companies out every day, and guide them through the process without putting them off.
So you're saying it's go big or go home. Does that mean you can't have small innovations that go through the system? Because it's like, if nothing happens less than $5 million, then I'm assuming there has to be a certain amount of effort involved. I mean, you're not going to do little things that might make big differences.
It tends to, because of they tend to be bigger plays. I mean, a small play would be, I mean, the smallest I've ever worked on has been a $25 million exit.
Wow.
Yeah, because if the business is, the industry is so large in throughput, and it is so inefficient in this country, in that it's you know, it's got it's highly fractioned, it's got multiple layers, a lot of different things going on, so there's a hell of a lot of opportunity. But I mean, a typical business is, I would say, that we would deal with, is going to have an over $100 million value.
Interesting.
After 3-4 years.
But that's, so you're saying, you're referencing the US system, but what about other countries? Is it easier to get the smaller innovations through in other countries?
No, it's much harder, because they haven't got the money to invest in it. I mean, this is the weird thing, and it is weird, and should be noted as such, is that because the system here is so inefficient and has so much opportunity within it, most of the companies that we're dealing with are coming here because the funding exists, whether it's through the NIH or it's through DARPA or it's through the angels or the
Right.
VCs. The funding machine is here to support the innovation,
Right.
but in part it's because it's a less streamlined system. So when we're working with companies in India um, and or Scotland, great some great innovations, but they're really looking to either the EU to fund it or the US.
Interesting. So what's the dividing line? Like, what makes it something that has to go down your path as opposed to something that doesn't? Like, for example, one of the patents I have with one of my clients is a device that allows you to detect how well your portfolio is doing based on scent. Obviously, it's not something that you insert into somebody, but it could be like a wellness device. Does it have to be like applied to the body, or
No.
what is the dividing line?
Our knowledge base is regulated by CDRH.
Okay.
So that is the vertical of the FDA that we know. So we won't work on drugs. We don't help drug companies, but we'll help drug delivery companies, or we'll help companion products. Where you're seeing a lot of really interesting work right now is this world of companion products. So that being, if I have a drug for this and I have a digital product for that and I have a behavioral therapy for this, can I put those together to make something that makes the patient outcome better?
Right.
And so, you know, there is a great company over here that has been working with sound therapy for a while. There is and you know, the point at which the trigger is when you make a claim that it does something that benefits a human being.
Oh, so any kind of wellness at all? Any kind of wellness at all will.
Well, so you're in the gray zone there. If if and there is this is not my expression, but the words that you describe to make that improvement are key. And there is a point, and they call them weasel words,
Mhm.
where if you're on the health side, then you may be making one set of claims, and
Right.
they're fuzzy. And if you're on the medical side, you will be being statistic. I mean, um, physicians are going to want to know that something has a statistical benefit and it's been developed, and you know, so forth. So this is it's a really interesting part of the industry, which is this sort of gray zone that is appearing more and more every day, and where I think entrepreneurs can be clever and begin to sort of build up data sets around what the claim might actually be. So, you know, do we know that lavender as a scent makes you feel sleepy? Yeah, there's pretty good documentation that almonds are good for sleep, and so's lavender.
Right.
Um, but you know, to level to which you say it, so it's like what the words you hear a lot is it depends. It depends what you're saying you're going to do, and what the outcome is going to be, and how it was validated, and so forth.
Yeah. So something like your Apple Watch. Is this FDA approved? It doesn't have to be, right? Because it's doing like an estimation of EKGs and stuff like that. It's not actually medical grade.
I believe that they are claiming now that some of what it's doing is medical grade.
Okay. So it would be covered under this. So if I created a device that that did sort of fairly accurate, then it would have to go through here to get the stamp of approval. Otherwise, I could create a device that wasn't as accurate, and they could both exist, but they just don't
Well,
have to.
you've picked at another sort of interesting arena, because what is happen, and a lot of these opinions are just sort of things that I believe to be true, but what's happened over time is that the diagnostic sides have gone up and up and up in specificity and sensitivity, and they've gotten better and better and better and better. But at the same time, there is an opportunity for these more derivative diagnostics to take place. And so there's a sort of second tier, which is probably what used to happen years ago, that is appearing to say, we're not going to tell you that this is this, a thermometer doesn't tell you you've got the flu or COVID or whatever. A thermometer says you're hot. And so there is this sort of this tier of products and systems coming in, which give information, but they don't present a diagnosis to that information. And I could give you multiple examples of where that could be very useful to a physician to say, oh, this is happening as well. Doesn't say what it is, but it does. It's just another sort of check mark. A lot of times physicians work to these sort of multiple categories that they're looking at, and so that again is just another interesting area that there's a lot of innovation going on in.
Right, but those kind of innovations don't actually need to go through this process, right?
No.
They're much smoother. Okay.
No. The minute you're definitive, the more definitive you are, the higher the level of, the higher the classification you will likely have to be meeting.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. There was this one company that I was working with a while back, and they had a device that would attach to your knee after knee surgery. And what it would do is it would detect how much movement you would move after the surgery to make sure that you were doing all the exercises required. And this thing, it just like had two sensors. One went on the top part of the leg, one went on the bottom part of the leg, and it just measured the distance and how often they came closer together and went further apart. And then that went to a cell phone, which went up to the cloud. Is that something that would fall into your category?
Probably. The answer is maybe. The answer is maybe. I mean, that area and
areas.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about that sort of product is that physiotherapy is one of the most least areas that people are least compliant. And there's a statistic out there somewhere that on knee surgeries, 90% of knee surgeries is successful 2 days after the surgery.
Right.
60% is successful 2 months after, and that's all because of physiotherapy. Mm-hmm. And so, and the surgeon has nothing to go on other than to believe that patient did what they're supposed to do, which they don't. And so I can imagine a scenario if you're essentially feeding back derivative information that the surgeon is going to look at and say, well, this individual is not compliant they're not doing it enough, the angle that they're going to is not enough, and then that is derivative, and it could be a class 1, it could be a class 1 exempt. And at the same time, if that he was then going to, or she was going to change the therapy based on what he saw, then it might upgrade to something else. So it might go to a class 2. So that's where, it sort of, if it leads to a change in therapy, then there's more likely to have gone up in its classification.
Interesting. So what's coming down the pipe now that you're seeing that's hotly in demand? Is it something to do with drug delivery systems, or what is it like? What are people most buzzing about?
It's the shift to systems. I think the days of episodic care you know, a moment of you go see the doctor, you take 3 pills and you walk out,
Yeah.
and then come back in 6 months, or that you go and get your knee surgery and you know, never see the doctor again. I think those are on the way out. And the whole idea that we're living within in a continuum of care, where the physician is, or prescriber is, aware of my biome, my phenome, alongside, you know, my genetics and so forth, and has engaged me in my health, then that is going to a system solution. And in that system, there might be a device that is doing something. There might be some sensors that are reading something. There's certainly something going on in the cloud that is then shooting information out. And I mean, so the sort of things I work on today are systems of care. And this is a, you know, particular.
Did you draw that?
What's that?
Did you draw that?
Yes.
Oh, you have a second career as a cartoonist. That was great.
Well, that's design school for you. It still works. So, I think you can take that idea of a system, you can take it into the drug world with all sorts of different things, devices, physiotherapy, getting somebody to show up at the hospital on time. I mean, there's a whole lot of different ways of engaging. And so what I think is exciting about that is a lot of it doesn't actually change the core therapies themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, another shift would be that it is recognized that we've got to move from a industry based on fixing something. You wait till it's broken and you fix it,
Yeah.
to actually not having it break in the first place. And so, you know, the classic statistic is that 75% of all healthcare issues and costs are in the hands of the patient.
Yeah.
They're in choices. You know, do you smoke? Do you drink too much? Do you, you know, what, do you take enough exercise? Blah, blah, what all those things are. And so I think this sort of system world we're moving into is really, it's very exciting. It's big. Of course, another one would be behavioral health, which is facilitated by the ability to carry around a sensor. Basically, this is a sensor, and the sensor that can do all sorts of fun things. So behavioral system continuums of care are kind of some of the hot ones.
Yeah, I'm waiting for AI somewhere to tell me, don't do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, you know, prior to me doing it. So is it able to predict what's coming up? Because if you think about it, if it's got enough data and it can do machine learning, it can run simulations on what would happen if I did this or that, right? So it should be able to proactively tell me how I need to live my life. No, I mean, is that where we're heading eventually?
I think we will all be getting better advice, whether or not the humans are motivated. You know, if to actually do it, I don't know. I think in this sort of strange year that we've had, it should be evident to everybody that their behaviors are part of the solution and or part of the problem. And, you know, it is, I think COVID has thrown up so many different opportunities and weaknesses in the system that we need to think about it differently. I mean, it has allowed us to embrace telehealth in a way that we were kind of resisting going into that, and now it's there, and everybody thinks it's better. The physicians are able to, you know, triage patients earlier and see the ones that matter, and so forth. So I think to break down what the year of COVID has done to the healthcare system, what it's shown. It covers drugs and vaccines and devices and monitoring of things and behaviors. Everything is right in there. So it's a very telling time.
Yeah. Well, it leads me back to the disruption causes change, right? I mean, it's like unless something happens, people will just continue doing what they're doing, right? I mean, if somebody's going to continue smoking until they have a heart attack and have a realization that this is not going to go on. So unless some crisis occurs, which is what happened, this crisis sort of has shown all these other things to happen. Like, for example, working from home, right? I mean, people were able to work from home very effectively for what, 10, 20 years now. But now when we're forced to, it's like it happens. So I think the same thing is happening in the medical space too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
When the crisis occurs, things change. So you almost go, well, maybe we should just have crises happen. Maybe we should just make these crises happen so we can get change to occur.
Yeah. Well, and particularly when this particular crisis was well predicted, everybody knew it was coming, and they didn't know quite what the form was, but here it is, and we weren't prepared, and the
Right.
countries that were prepared have got through it relatively easily, and other ones have just been brought to their knees.
So I get this sense that things are moving more rapidly in this space. Is that true, or is it just what the media is telling me?
More rapidly in what sense?
Like things are getting to market quicker. Has any of that sped up at all, or is
Well,
this
there is. I think you're referring to a thing called an EUA,
right?
which is was something the FDA said that they would emergency use authorization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A lot of people thought this was like, oh, they're going to just let anything through, and that was not the case. And there were many companies. When this first broke out, I spent a lot of time saying, please don't do what you're about to do, because I think it's a big mistake. And it was one of these sort of risk trade-offs, and it has been useful in many cases. But no, I think it has perhaps more importantly kind of spurred a real interest in applying new methods, not to the actual sort of moment of care itself, but into sort of facilitating it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I would bet that a third of the companies are in this sort of companion information. They're like your little angle tester for the
Right.
knee,
Yeah.
to say, hey, if you continue not to bend your knee enough, you're not going to be well, and you will be back limping into the hospital in 8 months' time, and that's avoidable.
Yeah. Well, they showed some interesting figures on post-op care, and basically that's the thing that triggers whether it's a successful procedure or not, right? It's not
Absolutely.
the tiny little time frame where they go in and replace this bit or that bit. It's all the post-op care. So again, it falls back to the patient, right? The patient needs, and if there was some way to help them do what they do, then I think all of that stuff is good.
Well, I think this is people in one of the areas I rail against is people use this word behavior change. And I'm just like, no, just stop with that. Motivate my behavior. Don't change it. Motivate me to do something. Don't go around thinking this guy's got to do this because it's better for him. That doesn't work. And so how you motivate, beneficial behaviors, I think is really fascinating, because it involves the psyche, and for different ages and different genders and all of this, we all get motivated in different ways. And so this sort of the interface side of what might motivate me to behave better might be something completely different for somebody else. So we were sort of picking our adventure.
Yeah, when you think about it, I mean, leave so many trails of data out there in the world, you'd think that if it just look at those trails of data, it would figure out what motivates me and what doesn't motivate me, and then use that to suggest some kind of motivation to change behavior.
Yeah.
So we just need these systems to be able to record all that and then tell us, you know what, if you did more of this, then maybe you'd get more of that.
Yep. I'm trying to figure it out. It's got something to do with fishing and whiskey, I think, for me. But
I love the sound of that. So where do you see things going in the future? So like 10 years from now, where will we be? Do you think things will be faster? Do you think things will be better? Do you think there'll be more systemic?
I do. I mean, designers, with people with a design and an invention and entrepreneurial mindset, are always prone to optimism. And if I were to give you the laundry list of the companies that we were dealing with, all of them, but bar none, would have an impact on our lot on this earth, our time on this earth. And so and many of them will come to market, and they will benefit the human race. And so I think it will be better. You know, for the big system side, the institution side, there will be a mass. We have to take money out of the system, that we just, and that doesn't mean that, and we're going to do that in a sort of awkward American way, which will be, and I'm an American, so I can say this, which will be, we will homogenize. You know, what McDonald's did for the hamburger industry, by providing better data, more timely to physicians and to engaging patients, we will create better systems of care that are by default more efficient, because they are simply not efficient right now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is where the rich seams of where we can invest, and a company can raise $10 million to put a new thing on the market, because they can actually justify the benefit. That this will have significant financial as well as clinical value.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think we will have a different relationship with our health in years to come. We will be more engaged. Those of us that aren't will likely pay the price. It doesn't. It no longer, just as the tobacco industry was taken on eventually by the people who are paying for sick smokers. I think healthcare, ultimately, we're saying we've got to do this because we can't afford to pay so much of our GDP towards unhealthy people.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying, what you were saying before is that the system, the way it is today, the U.S. system sort of drives change and money and entrepreneurialism. This is worth to change. And I don't want to get political or anything like that, but what if we were moving more towards a single payer system and systems like in other countries? Would that stifle innovation here? You think if we started to become more like
I think it would, actually. Yeah. I think it would. I mean, we do a lot of work. We're doing a lot of work with India, where there's tremendous innovators. They are and great technology and so forth. If the money isn't in the system to pay for it, to become to enter the health system, then that's the problem. And so, you know, somewhere the engine has to be fueled. Yeah. And right now in the US, the fuel is coming out of the VC industry, and overseas in China and India, a lot of it is being funded by the government. So it's being paid for one way or another.
Yeah.
but I think here it's so much, the pot is so much larger because the inefficiencies. I mean, we have, what is it, twice our health per capita health is twice the cost of anybody else on Earth, and we are 37th. Yep, twice the cost of any other country on Earth, and we are 37th most healthy.
Wow.
So
that's insane.
It's crazy. So that I think that sort of illustrates that we are well motivated to fund change.
Right. But if we start moving more towards those other models, then does that mean the government would have to kick in the leftover pieces, right, to keep it at that same level of invention? No?
I think, this conversation is always going to have a political, I think it is so far outside of the psyche, but we will get there in our own slightly awkward way. I mean, Medicare is a socialized
way. It's the American way.
Then we'll get there the American way. And you're seeing, big institutions linking up. You're seeing big insurance companies linking up, big hospital systems. They're basically taking the rattle out, and they're taking the inefficiencies out. So I think that's realistically, that's the path we're on.
Yeah. And I think it has to eventually, because if you look at, just the collecting, if you had, reasonable health records that knew everything, then you could capture so many patterns in what's in the data. It would be amazing what we could do if we had it all, even just the simplistic, let's get everyone's electronic health records together in some way that we could actually scan them and know something and do some digging on them. Right? Those things they're starting to happen. I'm starting to see them happen just, on the surface. But I think we just need more and more of that, because the more we collect this data and more we analyze this data, then the more data, more outcomes we can get that are beneficial.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. One of the companies we in our portfolio looks at drug interactions. And recently they threw up a statistic, and it's all very clever looking at algorithms. You threw up a statistic that on one particular drug, 40% of the patients went in back to their primary care physician and got another drug to counter the side effect of the first drug.
Yes. I have seen that. It's happened to me and my wife as well. So I see it happening.
So, this is when you're on 6 medications, which many people are on, there is a lot of stuff going on that at a certain point it might be better to be on less medications.
That's right. Because you've got one medication is eliminating the other. Oh, it's a chain. But if you think about it, even now when you go into the doctor's office, they'll tell you, okay, well, here's the medication, here's the side effect, and then here's a string of other medications we can give you to alleviate this side effect and this side effect. It's just everything becomes a cocktail, right? And everybody.
It's a cocktail.
Amazing. So if somebody, are you looking for new companies to come into the fold?
Our view is we have we talk to anybody once.
and the second time.
and if so we talk to everybody. Mm-hmm. If we think that there is an opportunity for us to be useful to them, we've got a simple, but I'm going to say clever survey, which allows us to find out where any particular entrepreneur is in space and time.
Right.
And which will say, this is what we see. Because a lot of times entrepreneurs tell you what they want to tell you. Mm-hmm. They don't actually tell you what you need to know. Exactly. And so we look at it more from the point of view of what the information that is needed. And then from there, we will sign on with them in any number of ways, and it runs the gamut from taking a very small equity position to being paid. It is we've also sort of got an accelerator fund that we're launching within the next few weeks, where we will accelerate promising companies and provide them with money. So we're very situational, and I don't want to waste my time or their time. And so finding the right solution, the right fit, something that works for them is what we do.
So there's no need for them to actually be in New England. They could be anywhere and they can still.
They are all over the world. Yeah.
Cool. So what would be the best way if someone were listening to this, watching this, and they want to get in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
I think what's my email? My email is just email me, apetrie@nemicenter.com. LinkedIn is good. We use LinkedIn. But if you find New England Medical Innovation Center, you'll find us.
All right. Well, I'll get your contact information. I'll add it to the video so everybody who wants to get in touch with you will be able to. So that sounds great. Is there anything particular you're looking for out there that is in demand, is hotly in demand right now, that people that you'd be interested in?
Every time I think that there might be one thing, somebody walks through the door with something completely different, I'm like, that's cool. No, we measure. I mean, if we think that if we can see why something is clinically relevant and has a potential market value, we're open.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. It was a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, super. Lovely talking to you.
As soon as it's up and running, and if you could just fire me your bio and contact information, I'll go ahead and add that to the show. So thanks so much.
Very good. All righty. Thank you. Yeah.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.